Great, awesome. Am I on? Let's see if this goes. Test, test. Amazing. Wow. Welcome, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. And happy Hanukkah, of course. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for giving me your time and attention today. It really means a lot to me that you're here and that you're taking a moment to kind of hear a bit more about my story. My name is Judy. And I'm an American Israeli living in Jerusalem, and I'm also a reserve duty officer for the IDF. So there we go. There's my Israeli and American passport, and that's that's always fun. And then me on base during the beginning of the war. So there's a lot that we could talk about today surrounding the war. Of course, there's a lot going on in Israel, but just for the sake of our time and our purposes, I'd like to focus a bit on my personal experience during the week of October 7th of last year, what it was like serving in reserve duty during the first few months, and I'll present at the end an initiative to support the IDF and Israel directly. So, first of all, a bit of background. I was born and raised here in Marietta, Georgia, and mainly with my mom and my two brothers. I loved growing up in a very close religious community. We grew up actually at a congregation down the road from here. And of course, we meet on Shabbat. Friday night, we had a great routine, Friday night services, and me and the rest of the teens and youth would go out afterwards. And we'd meet during the week, Tuesday night Bible studies, pray, worship, study together. I truly loved growing up there. I celebrated my bat mitzvah there. It was a very intense program and was very actively involved in our high school youth program with some of the kids of some of the parents here. So that's really lovely. In 2009, I graduated from Pope and went on to study psychology at the University of Georgia. Any UGA fans? Wow. Oh no! Oh no! I'm not in the right territory. Oh jeez, I should just leave now. I'm just kidding. Oh gosh, wow. Well, good to know. It's fine, SEC. We already did that. All right. So the summer between my junior and senior years in college, my rabbi led a 3-week long young adult trip to Israel that I was very ecstatic to join. This is back in 2012. And can anybody recognize where we are in that right picture over there? On the Sea of Galilee. And on the left picture, that one's harder. Ooh, not Masada. That's a great guess. We're in Sde Boker, which is right next to, it's the home of Ben Gurion. Right there, we are on the edge of his grave, kind of right there in the front. If you've never been, I recommend going. The Negev Desert is beautiful. So we took time exploring the country. We volunteered in different communities. We spent time learning about both the biblical and the historical history background of Israel. Now, prior to embarking on this trip, I was always very proud of being Jewish. Both my parents are Jewish. I'm the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor, who I'm named after, actually. I've always had a connection to Hebrew and celebrating the holidays, and of course observing the holidays, but there was really nothing like physically being in Israel. Now, how many of you guys have already been to Israel? Not too shabby. Okay, we'll take it. So I think you guys can relate when I say that the trip it really left a very significant impression on me. So upon graduating, there's graduation. It's okay if you're not fans. I'll still appreciate you guys. It's okay. It's fine. We'll take it. So upon graduating, I worked for a year, paid off my remaining student debt, saved some money, and then moved to Israel with a friend in September of 2014. Sorry, it looks like some of the text shrunk there, but that's me and my friend Grace on the right when we got to Israel just a few days later. Ecstatic, of course. So my intention really when I moved to Israel in September of 2014 was to stay for a year and learn a bit of Hebrew, a little bit more than was required for my bat mitzvah, and see if I could become a bit more conversational. But after a few months in Israel in January of 2015, I had a very profound moment with God. Now, it wasn't during a worship service, and it wasn't during a conference. It wasn't while sitting in front of an ocean. It was at a bus stop. And God speaks in the most mysterious of ways. So at the time, I was living in a town called Mevaseret, which is right outside of Jerusalem. And when I was waiting at the bus stop for my ride to Hebrew school, to Ulpan. Now, there was a small memorial for a soldier who had been killed in a previous war right next to that bus stop. If you've been to Israel, you see memorials scattered throughout the country everywhere. It's an unfortunate part of our reality. But there was a memorial there, and someone had hung an Israeli flag on the tree that was right in front of the memorial, but the flag had fallen into the dirt and had gotten kind of muddied from some of the rain. So I ran over just to retie the flag. I was like, oh, that's silly. Everyone knows, if you're a good American, you know that the flag should never be on the ground, right? So similar in Israel. So I ran over to retie and came back to the bus stop. And at that moment, I had a very, I'll call it like a very deep knowing in like that hit my soul. I won't say the audible voice of God. I'm very careful with that. But I had a very deep knowing in my gut that God was communicating to me and saying that this is my home and this is where I'm meant to stay. So I knew with absolute certainty, this wasn't like, oh, is that you? No, I knew 100% that this was coming from Hashem and that Israel was where I was meant to build my life. So in order to build my life there, I knew that I had to serve in the army as well. Now at that time, I was 22, just turning 23, and according to Israel, making aliyah or getting citizenship at that age, you have the opportunity to join the army, but it's not required. It's considered volunteer, which doesn't change anything about your service itself, but it just means that you have the option to draft or to not draft. So I just received my citizenship a few weeks prior, and after Hebrew class that day, like that morning I was at this bus stop, that afternoon, that day, I went to the army draft office, which looks like that. That's the one in Jerusalem. It's called the Lishkat HaGiyus, the recruiting office. Nothing super official. But you see these bars there, and right behind these bars, there's a smaller building, not even the large one behind us, but a smaller building that have people sitting there, guards, of course. And at that point, I think I was in Hebrew school for like 2 weeks. And so the extent of my Hebrew was ani means I, and I didn't know the word for the army, actually. I kept getting it confused. Army in Hebrew is tzava, but the word for color is tseva. So I kept like mixing up the word color and army. It was a mess. So I get to the front door here, literally here, and I said, ani army. And I like pointed into the building, like that was as far as I got. But you know, language is meant for communication, so I made my point. And I truly don't know why, but they allowed me in. And I was able to, after a bit of time, find somebody though that spoke English that I could talk a bit more with. And then I talked to my family a few days later about that decision. Some know that my mom wasn't particularly ecstatic about that, but the Lord tells you to do something. I told her, I said, that's how you raised me. I listened to God. So he told me to do something, and that's what I'm doing. So many of you guys probably know that in Israel, at 18, everybody drafts there, men and women, for at least 2 years, men typically longer. And if you're in certain elite units or units that have longer training periods, you're in for longer because your training is longer. And though it wasn't required, I felt pretty compelled to. And I certainly was not fluent in Hebrew. Oh, there's on draft day, also with my same friend who had moved to Israel with me. And I am wearing a UGA sweatshirt, so I apologize to those who are not fans. So in March of 2016, I started basic training as a private, of course. This is on a base called Michve Elon on the left, which is a base up north for specifically people who have made aliyah, for people coming from all over the world who need a little bit more help with Hebrew. And it's kind of like a soft land to the army because, of course, you need to learn a bit more Hebrew, learn commands, etc. And then on the right there, of course, you guys recognize that. Where am I there? At the Western Wall, at the Kotel, exactly. And that's with some of the others who are training with me. I think in that picture we probably have like 9 different countries represented just with those guys there. Some from Uruguay, some from Spain, some from France also. So it's pretty amazing to get an opportunity to meet those kinds of people. And so basic training for me was maybe a month and a half, 2 months. And then after that, went to advanced training. I'm part of a unit called Homefront Command, which we focus primarily on the civilian population, all of the civilians in all different areas. We're talking about Russian speakers in Ashkelon and Bedouins in the Negev who speak Arabic and Americans in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv and in Eilat. And our main mission is search and rescue and dealing with chemical warfare. So that's what I was specializing in as an instructor. So this was during War Week on the left, part of training. We're holding signs that say the name of our course, Are You Ready for War Week? This was at the beginning, which is why we're all still smiling. And we have that drill in the top right, which was another part, not during training, that was actually a situation. But yeah, some of my friends and I. Anyways, you can tell they're all quite young because all of them were 4 or 5 years younger than me at that point, at the age of 18. So I'm still friends with a bunch of them. Anyways, so my job as a corporal, as a soldier, was to teach chemical war and search and rescue, which God gave me the wherewithal to handle in Hebrew. And then less than a year later, I went to officer's course. So on the right there is as an officer at our command central in Ramleh, which is kind of closer to the coast in Israel. And then on the left, that was right at the end of my active duty service. There was a rocket that had hit a home in Beersheba, and it was of an Ethiopian family. And the mother had like 30 seconds to get all 3 of her kids to the bomb shelter, and she did, and it saved their lives. The bomb shelter was the only thing that remained there. So my base's commander, I was the only English speaker on base, he sent me to go and speak on the IDF's webpage with the guy at the time who was, the spokesperson. We went on like IDF page on their Facebook Live and did some talks from there. And then while I was there also, there were commanders from various armies around the world. You can see that those uniforms don't look like us. There was a group of people next to me, and they were like, oh, you must do this for a living, right? Like, come, and I was like, actually not at all, but I can come talk to your people. And they also were not English speaking, but the other countries were. So I had a chance to kind of speak to some leaders of other armies about that situation and about the importance of the Iron Dome and of our security. So the base that I served on is called Machane Orim. Now, you can see, hopefully you can see, Israel is quite tiny, we all know this, size of New Jersey. Some would say, I think it fits in Georgia in terms of land mass like 6 or 7 times, so very small. Here we have the border of Gaza, follows up, and here is where my base is. It's a couple of kilometers or a few miles away, and that's where I served for the full kind of year that I was an officer there as a first and second lieutenant. And that's also where I served in reserve duty. So let's fast forward to the beginning of October 2023. October 1st is actually my birthday. This was at a birthday dinner with some of my friends. Really lovely, incredible people. On the right, it was also, of course, during Sukkot. That's in my sukkah in our backyard with some of my other friends. And as you can see, we're all white colonizers. I think we really need to focus on that. I'm totally kidding. So yeah, we have a great time. These are some of my closest friends. Actually, this one over here was also, we grew up together as well, me and his wife, and he was drafted. He's an elite combat unit. And 2 weeks into the war, they had their first child, their first son, and he was able to beg his commander and stay home until his son's bris, and then go into duty in Gaza. So there was a lot of prayer surrounding some of these friends of mine. And thank God he's still alive. His commander and some others in his unit have been killed, though. So on October 7th, we were just wrapping up Sukkot, of course, rolling right into Simchat Torah. Of course, you guys know, on this day, we celebrate the beauty of God's commandments, of obeying his commands. We look at King David. We find inspiration in his Psalms that speak of his joy and his laughter surrounding living a life of God's commandments, as Rabbi prayed about finding our meaning in that. Of course, that's the holiday. So in most religious families, men are praying at the synagogue down the street. Non-religious families, they might be sleeping in. Most sukkahs are still up. I'm in bed happily because it's Shabbat. And so loud sirens start. You can kind of see, I don't know if it'll pull up as a video. I don't know if you guys are able to click on that left button or on this screen. If it's not, it's okay. Oh, cool. Yeah. So that's just my phone. That's October 7th. That's you can see the date on the top there. That's at 8 in the evening. And we still have sirens going. These are called Seva Adom, which is the red. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, guys. The red alert. This is just me scrolling on my phone. These are all the towns being affected by the red alerts, meaning that all of them are running to their bomb shelters. And that's just, that's within a period of minutes. You have all of those scrolling through. And that's one of my friends who texted me, checking in on me. And then on the right side here, she was asking if there would be buses that day. It's a good question. And then on the right side there, that's actually the bomb shelter from our building. I live in a building of 6 apartments. It's an older building, and we share a bomb shelter downstairs. On October 7th, it was filled with a lot of people's things. It's sometimes used as storage. So we went in there on October 8th and cleaned it out between sirens. Brought down some blankets for the kids. Brought down some waters. After that, we currently have a lot of different snacks. Brought down fans. It gets really stuffy, as you can imagine. And then behind there, it says Yetziat Cherum, which is like an emergency exit. That's basically if the building collapses from a rocket, you have to get out another way. So there's right there behind kind of that door, there's a little exit, which also locks. And then there's a restroom that is probably as old as the building and probably hasn't been touched since the building was created. But there are some waters there as well. Less for drinking, more for flushing the toilet if necessary, if we're going to be in there for hours. On October 7th and after that, it was more like minutes at a time. It's 10 minutes every time an alarm goes off, and then we leave from there. Go back into our house. We were kind of joking that they weren't, Hamas wasn't letting us get our coffee because every time we'd go back up, we'd have to go back down. So that lasted for a while. We have to have humor. Jews have a great sense of humor, and there's a reason for that, because it's not just a coping mechanism. It's truly how you get through these situations. So we were joking about it, but it was very challenging. There were little kids in there who were like, why are they trying to kill us? Why do these people hate us? We didn't do anything to them. And I'm like, you're right. You are right. So it was an experience that I don't wish upon anyone. Of course, since then, there's been a lot more sirens and a lot more rockets, tens of thousands actually, and different people in the country have had to hide at different times in their bomb shelters. And of course, in Jerusalem, we had not experienced too many rockets. Even though Israel is tiny, the rockets only kind of get to certain areas, especially the ones that are just lobbed from Gaza. They're very different than the ballistic missiles that come over from Iran or from Yemen. Or I should say the Houthis, I think it's in English. We've had some problems with them over the last few days. But in Jerusalem, typically during times of moderate peace, there's not rocket sirens. It's very uncommon. Every few years, maybe a rocket gets to Jerusalem. In the south, we have it consistently even during times of peace, and I would assume that a lot of that's not even reported on international news. It's just kind of part of what we're unfortunately used to. But this particular escalation was very intense. Once we get downstairs to that bomb shelter, one of the guys who in my building works for MADA, which is the Magen David Adom, it's the Red Cross in Israel. He comes into the bomb shelter during the first sirens, and we're all waking up. I mean, half the guys are in their pajamas and not fully dressed, and all of us are rubbing our eyes. Of course, this is quite early in the morning, 6:30, 7 a.m. And he goes, now, I don't know if you all are updated, but there are hostages and Israelis have been murdered and there are terrorists storming the country. This is super serious. And I know on the morning of October 7th, America also woke up to this news. Maybe afterwards, if you guys would like, I would love to hear some of the experiences that you guys had kind of waking up to this news and understanding what that means for your community. But as you can imagine, the following few days were really the worst of our lives. I won't go into too much detail, of course. Many of you guys saw videos. But the death toll of Israelis that were brutally murdered at the Nova Music Festival, as well as from the surrounding neighborhoods, just kept climbing. The images of the burned homes, I saw a few of those last week down in Be'eri when we were filming, but I'll show you guys that video at the end. The videos of Israelis screaming as they were being captured, stories of survivors hiding for 14 hours. I mean, this goes on and on. Really worse than any horror movie. And we were in shock, but both in mourning and survival mode kind of at the same time. Hundreds of terrorists hadn't just broken into our borders. They were still pressing inland from Gaza when my commander called me on the evening of October 9th. So I started, that works for me, interesting. So here's some of the images from the magazines that were coming out during October. On the left it says the 7th of October. This was only, I think, 7 days into the war. On the top left it says Sheva Yamim. And then it says in Hebrew here, Hayom shebo medinat Yisrael ishtana letamid, musaf lemilchama meuchad. So here it's the day where the country of Israel has been changed forever. And then they had some extra things on the war that was inside this is of course them breaking through, images of breaking through the border with Gaza. And then the outline of the country of Israel with kind of a beating heart that's bleeding on the left. And that, I think, is a very poignant image. So as I kind of began relaying the news of my next day draft to friends and family, some warned against me going. Now, it's reserve duty, and there is a requirement to go. But if you have some kind of crazy reason, you can be released during certain situations. At that point, I was recovering from a recent emergency abdominal surgery, and I wasn't back full-time at work, actually. I was still recovering, so my friends and family were a little bit nervous that just for my health for going down south. But there really was a very real and present threat to survival for the nation of Israel, so this really wasn't too much of a question for me. Of course, I told them, God will protect me, I'm going down, and if not, then it's kind of my time anyways. But while I was packing that evening, I was really surprised to receive a call from a friend who had arrived to base on the 7th. His voice was super shaky, and I hadn't heard this news yet, but he proceeded to tell me that on the 7th our base had been brutally attacked, that we lost a common friend, Aharon, who was with us in active duty, who had continued serving, along with other soldiers. And our base, it's combat support. Like, my base is not combat. It's focused on civilian protection of all civilians. Arabs, Jews, Druze, Bedouins, doesn't matter. So my base is typically this, I wish I could show you, I don't have so many pictures, but bunch of one-story, two-story buildings of soldiers who come every day like it's their job, very non-combat focused. But this non-threatening kind of collection of one-story offices had really turned into a war zone. And my friend didn't want me to be caught off guard when I arrived and saw what there was to see. Well, I'll get to that in a second. So my heart beat a little bit faster the evening of the 9th. I wasn't expecting that kind of news, but really fear wasn't part of the equation here. At the time, Israel's active duty army was 170,000 soldiers and officers. By October 10th, the army had drafted an additional 360,000 soldiers and officers. So we're talking about like almost tripling the numbers on bases and serving. Today, there's less than that serving because a lot of us have been released, but the majority of the combat soldiers are still in and continuing to fight, of course. So there really was no question. This was obviously a war for our home and for the protection of our families and for our future. This isn't a war that's far away. It's literally to protect our borders and to continue living life in Israel. So it's a pretty serious operation, drafting all these soldiers. So when I departed for base that next morning, that was me texting my family group. I said, hey guys, just got caught up by my unit. I'm heading to base tomorrow morning. I'll be down south, but working more in an office setting, not in the field or with weapons. I'll keep you updated. Then my older brother said was waiting on that news. Thanks for letting us know. Of course, there were more additions there. So as I departed for base the next morning, Waze reminded me that I was driving in dangerous territory, which was very odd. I'm driving inside of Israel, but I'm not even in areas of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, just within Israel. So this was a pretty wild reminder. But Waze wasn't wrong. Terrorists were still roaming the south, and not all of them had been captured or neutralized yet. So I had to stop at different gas stations. You can actually see that Waze had directed me from Jerusalem, that's where I live, down, and instead of taking me along the border with Gaza, which is where I usually go to get to base, which is like an hour and a half ride, it was directing me all the way down south, like a third of the way to Eilat, just to kind of swing back around along the Egyptian border so as to not deal with that. So what I had to do, of course, was stop at different gas stations along the way and ask the security forces at those gas stations which roads were already cleared of terrorists that I could drive on and which ones weren't. So it was pretty surreal experience. Of course, I kept my music off and my windows cracked because there were sirens still going. And I was hoping not to hear them because our protocol with my unit and for all of Israel is that if you're in a car and a siren goes off, you need to leave your car and get on the ground and put your hands over your head. Now, why would you have to do that if you feel safe in your car? Because the car is just a ticking time bomb. If shrapnel hits the engine, if shrapnel hits wherever gas is stored, and it blows up, you're in a worse place than you are if you're on the side of the road. But now what's the other compounded issue? That terrorists are still roaming the country, and I didn't want to get snatched. So I had to make that decision as I was driving those 2 hours down. What would I do in an event of a siren? At that moment, I had decided that I would continue in my car. But that was an incredibly difficult decision to make. So upon arriving safely to base, my heart really only had kind of a moment to stabilize before I saw all of the damage that my friend had relayed to me the night before. There were blown out windows everywhere, buildings sprayed with bullet holes, black explosion marks on the ground from RPGs that were detonated. Other grenades had gone off right down the hall from my office, blowing out full walls. And even after a lot of the initial cleanings, there were still blood-stained tiles in different buildings, including the one that I slept in that night. And the 5 motorcyclists that the terrorists had driven onto base were still there, just sitting there. The terrorists themselves no more, of course, by that point. And I started hearing some of the stories of a few of the soldiers, including this girl, Eden, from my base, who were there. She survived. This is on her Instagram page on the left. She was shot 12 times in her arms and legs, but she managed to stay alive until additional security forces arrived and transferred her to the hospital. On the right there, Israel, this Channel 12 News had made a whole story about our base, and they interviewed her. She had recovered enough to get her uniform, put it on again in the hospital. She's literally still in the hospital right there, and talk about the situation. And this was on, I don't have the date on there, but I could find her post again. It was when she had recovered enough to post something, and she tagged B'sis Orim, Machaneh Orim, Machoz Doron, which is the base that I was serving on. So it wasn't difficult to imagine all the horrors that had happened a few days prior. And we watched, all the photos and videos are from my phone. This isn't from any sort of online source. We took the picture of that. That's the TV, one of the many TVs in our war room on base, and we had all watched it together when it came out live on the news about our base, which was very challenging. So, now to work, arrived to base. This is the impression. This is what we're talking about. And when I had finished active duty in 2018, we reconfirmed sort of our placement for reserve duty. Not everybody has to serve in reserve duty. Combat soldiers do, and officers do. And then there are certain non-combat or combat support jobs that also have to serve. But you get to reconfirm kind of your placing. And they had asked me if I wanted to transfer to Jerusalem since I was living there, which would make it easier to go back and forth for different call-ups. But I just spent my last year really investing in the South, getting to know the communities in the South. We worked with mayors and heads of companies and things like that to distribute certain protocols, and so I really didn't want to leave that space. But I stayed there knowing that it would mean kind of more work for subsequent calls and subsequent call-ups. Now, due to my background in psychology, I was able to kind of move my reserve duty position from working within operations, which I did in active duty, to working directly with the civilian sector, with these mayors and heads of companies. So, of course, we had various trainings prior to the war. You get called up, you have trainings. It's a tad different than it is here in the U.S. I don't have much background with U.S. military, but I understand that typically reserves go in for a weekend each month. We typically go up for trainings. I have one that's scheduled now at the end of March for a week, and we'll have a week here, a day there. It's just whenever they want to give you extra training. So I had learned the ins and outs of reserve duty, but I hadn't fully grasped my position. And when I got to base, I was reminded, oh, you're an officer, which means that you also have soldiers, which means you also have to command soldiers, and I'm just trying to figure out the job. So it was a bit of a whirlwind. And when I get there, the soldiers, a lot of them had arrived maybe 2 days after me, a day or two after me, and a lot of them were falling apart. They were coming into the office crying because they were missing funerals of friends who had already been killed in battle during the first few days, or of those from the 7th. And really dreading the daily publication. Every single morning there was a publication of the list of soldiers who had died the day before. You guys probably get it on some of your apps or groups that you follow. But these aren't just names, these are their friends, these are the kids they went to high school with. So this was an extra challenge. And even though Israel is tiny, because Israel is so tiny, there's a degree or two of separation between everybody. Within the Jewish community, you play Jewish geography for 5 seconds, and you know how close people are and how you know people. And though this makes it very devastating, I'm working with people who are missing funerals, it also means that we support each other in very, very deep ways. Drop everything to help each other out. So within a few weeks, we had different restaurants. This is Aroma, which is kind of Israel's version of Starbucks, but I would venture to say much better. We had different, maybe, I don't know if that got you guys more than the UGA comment. I don't know. I don't know. But here in Aroma, this is me holding this bag. They started giving out sandwiches and free coffees to soldiers. You just stopped in uniform and they just tossed it to you. At the bottom, B'yachad Nenatzeach, which is our kind of theme of this war, Together We Will Win. They were writing that with little hearts at the bottom of these bags. This is their sign as you're ordering. It just says, soldiers and our security forces, we invite you to coffee and pastries and sandwiches for free. We love you guys. This is Aroma. So you had restaurants that were offering meals, and we really had kind of this B'yachad Nenatzeach plastered everywhere. We also had kids and other people from around the world sending us notes. The whole background, actually, image of this screenshot is all these different notes. This is from a wall on base where kids had sent us from around the country. Families were preparing snacks. There were kids that said, we miss you, thank you. This one on the top left was from a friend in reserve duty. His daughter had made that picture. and it says Todah Shemua Latzmechem, which is thank you, protect yourselves, like guard yourselves, make sure that you're okay. Very, very, very precious. So we definitely all stepped up for each other. We really received these notes, financial donations for winter supplies. Different famous Israeli artists performed on different bases, and radio stations came out to interview people who had survived or who were on base. We actually had a 13-year-old boy on our base whose sister was killed that day, but he came and performed his bar mitzvah in our dining hall, and it wasn't glamorous, but it was really, really meaningful. And he was kind of instantly adopted by all these female soldiers, like dancing around him, and it was a sight not for those who are weak in spirit. I feel like everybody definitely had a tear in their eye. And on a personal note, a friend of a soldier who I had just met during reserve duty, like a few weeks prior, allowed me to stay rent-free in his apartment that was much closer than 2 hours from base. It was 20 minutes, rent-free for months, just saying, I just bought this apartment, I haven't moved in yet, take it, any other female officers that need to go, like send them, and he would buy us groceries so that it wasn't empty when we would get home, and it was just really, really incredible. There were also really incredible, thought-provoking displays for the hostages all around the country. This is the one image that I took from Jerusalem WhatsApp group that I'm a part of. But these are the beds of all of the hostages. At that time, there was 252, if I'm not mistaken, and that's right in City Hall, a few minutes away from where I work. And then over here, maybe you guys saw some of these images. I would have included more. I probably should have included more, but there was an image of a hostage, and then a light, of course, and then these massive beams of light that went all the way into the sky for all 252 that created one huge beam in the middle of Jerusalem that you could see from all of Jerusalem. Really stunning display. I mean, everybody's in tears. The display is obviously much larger than the picture. I have a few more images that I can show you guys later. But anyways, the stories go on. And I'm sure that there have been kind of devastating times in your lives or in the lives of people that you care about that you knew that there was something that you had to do to help. There's like this stirring up that you're like, I have to get involved. I have to be part of this. Whether it's kind of larger scale events like 9/11 or Katrina or Sandy Hook, whatever it is, or on smaller scales, if there's a death in your family, like there has to be a way to help, right? It burns in you. You can't not do something. So kind of that same urgency hit me pretty personally, and I felt really strongly to do as much as possible. I tend to be I'll say smaller scale thinker. Like I want to know what impacts my community and how I can help them. I'm less involved in the side of politics and changing policies, and like I want to look the individual in the eye and ask them, how can I help you? So that's sort of where most of my desire comes from. And people all over the world started asking how they could help, so I started a little WhatsApp updates group. This was when I was in for the first few months of the war, and kind of sent them lists of organizations that I was finding in my few minutes of free time that were already working with the IDF, and sent it their way. Sent small updates. My brother this was from my younger brother, has a pretty funny sense of humor. I think you guys might understand this. On the left side here, he says, my sister sharing Israeli army updates on the family text thread. And then over here, it says, me still sharing my Wordle scores. So the memes were entertaining. Like I said, we all have a good sense of humor. We had tens of thousands of Israelis from the south, now also from the north, of course, that were displaced, are still displaced. There were local, we call them Hamas, which is like local neighborhood groups that just formed themselves with no funding and said, hey, does anybody have homes that these people can live in? So I kind of helped organize that a bit. Pretty meaningful stuff. There was a family of 10 that moved into one of the houses that I had kind of advertised on there. We also, after I finished my active reserve duty the first few months, we hosted some barbecues up north. There was a ministry that had purchased all of the meat, and we were going up north to the border to serve. This was already when we're involved in Lebanon, of course. So we were we could see the border from where we were. So I got together a bunch of volunteers. It was a little bit more than this in the picture. We took a bus, grabbed a friend of mine who's a tour guide. We used his tour bus. We drove up north and hosted this massive barbecue for like hundreds of soldiers. It was really cool. They're still doing that today. There are groups that come and host. It just brings a smile to the soldiers' faces. Food on base is not the best, so to have some really amazing food and people who care come in is important. Started gathering some tactical equipment. I had a few other congregations that were able to kind of support and help me purchase a bunch of pairs. You can only get a small snapshot, but I think we got maybe 12 or 15 pairs. At the time, at the beginning of the war, a lot of the tactical gear in Israel was being purchased out, so we had to find ways to bring it in from overseas, which is handling customs, and it's dealing with extra fees, etc. But this is one of my friends, Matan. You can see him in Gaza wearing the boots right here. So we purchased these Loas from America and brought them over. So we started gathering tactical gear, uniforms too. There's uniforms that you receive in the Army are, I would say, good for if you're on base or walking around the country, but for missions where you're running and sprinting and need to be very agile, tactical uniforms are important. So was able to get tactical uniforms. These guys also got boots. They're nieces and nephews of some of my Messianic friends in Jerusalem. This is one of the unit, and this soldier here in the middle, Gad, is one who I'm working with now, actually. But these are some tactical uniforms. They sent some videos thanking us for getting that together. So for my team of 70 soldiers, we got a bunch of stuff. This is one of my roommates. We got a bunch of stuff at the store, brought it down, and also were able to purchase 70 winter jackets. This was, of course, last winter. It's crazy that we're still in this thing. These are some of the guys that I work with. Obviously, you can see parents, grandparents. I mean, we're talking about like real people that have real families here. And everyone was pretty grateful for that. Pretty fun. Also was able to kind of get a hold of, there were organizations that contacted me to help out other lone soldiers, which is also what I always considered. A lone soldier is a soldier who doesn't have family living in Israel, to provide extra financial or emotional support. So these other guys in these pictures are some of my friends who also served in reserve duty, and they got some like food certificates, kind of help coordinate that. Yeah, so, okay, so in mid-December, I finished kind of my longest stint of reserve duty, and since then I've been called back for a week or two here and there. We helped bring back the civilians of Sderot, which is right next to Gaza, and a few other communities like that. And as a reserve officer and as a civilian, I can very much attest that this war is incredibly taxing on all of us. It's taxing on you guys, too, to see what's going on from over here and your heart be pulled towards Israel. I get it. I do. I have some friends since the war started who dropped their jobs and their careers to move into Israel advocacy positions in different organizations. And I see the toll that it's taking on them also. And I've tried to kind of describe our reality to people who are Jewish, who aren't Jewish, who have a connection to Israel, who don't have a connection to Israel. And it feels kind of impossible. I think maybe if you take like 9/11 and like a home invasion and combine that and multiply it by a few hundred, like you probably start getting close. But it's a very long-winded type war. So anyways, now I've returned to work. I work with a beautiful Messianic ministry in Jerusalem. I run events for our center, and it's a fun time. It's really hard to get back to kind of a normalcy when I have friends that are still in the battlefield. So because of that, a couple of my friends about 2 months ago reached out to me. One of them, Gad, here on the left. Netanel is in the picture on the top right. You can't really see his face. But they're both majors in reserve duty. He's ranked up since this picture was taken like a couple months ago. They're both majors in reserve duty, and they're officers in a team of 70 soldiers each. So they reached out. They asked, can you help? They were part of my team in the early days of the war. They were serving in non-combat, and then when their jobs ended in non-combat, they bumped back up to combat. They each served in combat units in active duty, but had shifted their jobs in reserve duty. Gad over here is a father of 6. He has a newborn also who's, I guess, now 2 months old, Precious. He's also a high school teacher. And his wife is with all of their kids, as you can imagine. He's in and out. On October 7th, him and his family served special needs communities, and they had like multiple students in wheelchairs who they were getting to the bomb shelters like on the 7th. Just an incredible religious family, very beautiful hearts. And Netanel, also a father of a little boy. His wife is my commander in reserve duty. And they look at the country and they say, we completed one role and we still have more to give, so we're going back into combat. And it's just a lot. It's a lot to take in. It's a lot to think about. You know, these real people, like not just names that appear on lists, like these real people with real lives, with real children, with real careers that they're putting completely on hold in order to serve the country. So they asked me if I could help. Basically, as reserve duty units that are not elite combat units, they sort of fall between the cracks. Now, this is something that's a little challenging to describe because it would never happen in the U.S. Army. Of course, every soldier is equipped with everything that they need. There's not a question if they have the right gear. Unfortunately, in Israel, it doesn't work the same way. Some people would just go off on a rant about the IDF and how dare they send soldiers in without the proper gear, or how dare they send them in with something that's not the best. And I say, okay, we can rant about that, but how far does a conversation like that go? I understand that the IDF has a lot of needs. If we look at it on a numbers level, and you just think, like Iron Dome, right? So we have the Iron Dome. We fielded like tens of thousands, close to 15 to 20,000 rockets at this point. Smaller ones, not the ballistic ones from overseas, but each of those rockets that are shot down costs $40,000 to shoot down. And we're talking about rockets that were made for maybe $500 in Gaza and were shot over. So we're talking about a lot of expenses, and we're talking about prioritizing. I'm not the head of the IDF. I don't know how they do it. I appreciate them for all of their service. I was in for a few months, and it took a toll on me. So these guys who have been in for a long time are taking more than a toll. But I get messages like every 2 weeks from a different reserve unit that says, help us get tactical gear, help us get drones, help us get all this stuff. So I took these two guys because they're my buddies and said, maybe there's something that we can do here. So I kind of want you to, we'll skip on over to the video. I'm kind of running out on time. So I think, let's see. Okay, so this clicks out. I think you guys have the video in the back there, or even from the website, either one. I started launching a project called Operation Equip. And you'll see that, yeah, we can play this. It's on our website that just went live last week. And you'll get to meet God through this video. So you guys can play that there. Hopefully there's sound. Awesome. Judy Seidner here, founder of Operation Equip. Our mission is to equip combat soldiers physically, mentally, and spiritually by providing tactical gear, words of encouragement, and dedicated prayer. When the war began on October 7th of 2023, it was a real shock for all of us. Obviously, nobody was expecting this to happen. And that day, me and some of my roommates were like, all right, what can we do? How can we set up? And then the night of the 9th, I got a call from my commander in reserve duty. I serve in a unit called Homefront Command, which is very specifically focused on the civilian sector, which had just been invaded. So the first part of this video is a little bit of background that I shared with you guys, which is why it's on my homepage, because not everybody, I'm not able to get to everybody, but once it goes through a little bit of background, you'll get to meet God here. If it doesn't load through the website, we can maybe try to pull up the shorter video that was on the disc. Yeah, that would work too. Thank you guys. I used to, when I was growing up at the other days prior, so this was a really significant time. Yeah. My base is right on the border with Gaza, and it was attacked, had been wrecked on the 7th, and by the time I got there, it was a sight. And I served for a few months, and I saw what a toll reserve duty took on these soldiers. I mean, being in the middle of all of this, and being within the system of the Army, and being away from family and friends in order to serve, it hits you on a level that is very deep and very difficult to describe. Right now in the war, where soldiers are still looking for tactical equipment, that just blows my mind. It blows my mind that somebody could go into Gaza not properly equipped. And I find it to be not just important, but like incumbent upon citizens and civilians who are enjoying the fact that Israel is still a nation, whether you're here in Israel or abroad, to be very intentional about the way that they can participate in this effort.
אנחנו היחידה שנופלת בין הכיסאות. אנחנו לוחמים כולנו, בסדר, אני הייתי בצנחנים, אנחנו יחידה לוחמת, של חבר מביא חבר. ברגע שיש פצוע, אני חייב להיות באותו רגע זמין וקופץ מהר. עושים שתי אופציות. או לוקחים את הקרמי של הצבא, מכניסים לווסט, ואז זה קופץ, או ששמים שתיים, שמים את הגופייה של הצבא, ועל זה שמים וסט רגיל, ואז זה מבזבז זמן. ואז כשהם מגיעים כולם, עם אותם בגדים, אותו זה מצוידים, טקטי, מגיע הפצוע, הוא אומר, בוא'נה, אני רוצה את זה.
To equip the
140 soldiers in both of these companies with a ceramic plated vest and a tactical helmet costs a total of $175,000. 100% of every dollar raised will go directly towards this goal. Would you kindly consider partnering with us by playing a proactive and meaningful role in protecting those who defend Israel by offering your financial support? These warriors do more than their part, so let's stand with them, and together we will win.
So I just launched this project. It's OperationEquip.com. It went live just a few days ago. I think I see what these guys are going through, and I say I want to help the best I can. I know that I'm here not just to say like, hey, send money. I'm here to garner prayer support. That's very important to me. There were multiple points that I can tell you very distinctively. I hadn't felt this in my life before, but there were multiple points when I was serving in reserve duty, and I literally felt like an extra boost that came from somewhere that I could not explain. Obviously, we know that's Hashem. And I knew that it was because of the people praying for me. And that was incredibly important to me. We prayed earlier during the service, the Mishe Berech, and the Mishe Berech for Chayalei Tzava, like our army, for the soldiers of our army. So I actually have, maybe we can either pass that out now. Yeah, Kim has a lot of those magnets. I printed off magnets, designed magnets that has the prayer in English. The English sounds a tad funny because it's not the Hebrew, but printed the prayer in English. Kim will hand out some of the magnets, and on there's my website too. I explain a bit more on the site about why is there this need, what's the difference between active and reserve duty. I show kind of the tactical equipment. So God was holding a lot of the equipment in the video. He had the helmet on and was shaking his head, and that's because the gear that they receive, it's like a flat helmet that doesn't have any internal padding, and it shakes on their head when they're running, and it gives them a headache. And so the newer gear, he was moving his head because he was so surprised that there was padding inside that you can actually adjust per soldier. And then the ceramic plated vest that he had in his hand, there was a quick, brief scene of me kind of shoving the plate inside of the vest. The tactical vests are made so that you can put the ceramic plates, which are bulletproof for, I think it's between 3 and 4 bullets, and then of course the plates shatter and you replace them. But the vests themselves stay good, and you can hook in all these things. Anyways, on my site I explain more. I won't waste your time with that. But I just wanted to share 2 last points in the next 2 minutes. While we were loading up the car from filming, so this was just 2 weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, right before I flew to the U.S., we filmed right next to Kibbutz Be'eri, which is one of the ones that was hit incredibly hard. We filmed in the military zone. We had to drop off our car, and me and the 2 girls who were filming with me, we hopped in God's car, and he brought us to the military zone, which is where we were filming all those guys going in and out. Like, the cars that were passing us were going, like, crossing this line, going into Gaza, and we were standing, like, right there. So we were filming in that space on purpose, and God was pointing out, like, different soldiers, and he was like, oh yeah, that vest is from AliExpress, and this guy ordered it, his from eBay, and so I walked around and I said, where'd you guys get your vest from? And they're like, oh, donations, of course. But they're carrying stuff that's like not great, but it's still unfortunately better than what they're provided with. So he pointed out this company called Maroon Dolphin, and it's Israeli made by some really incredible people in Israel who, God willing, in a few years will be providing the equipment for the IDF, but that's not right now, and these guys are in Gaza today. So that's why we kind of looked into purchasing these products. And we left the military zone, okay? Neither of my guys are disciples of Yeshua. One of them's religious, one of them's kind of also religious, but a tad bit less so. And we're leaving the military zone, and while we were driving back towards the civilian area, God started asking me questions. Now, I've served with him since the beginning of the war. For the first few months, we saw each other every day, and we hadn't spoken a lot about faith. In those situations, there's not a lot of personal details that you swap with people you're serving with. You're kind of in the midst of it all. But then, after trying to start this project and try to start fundraising for them and helping them with some tactical uniforms, then he asked the question. He says, what is it that you do again? Like as a civilian? And I said, I work for this Messianic ministry, and we do a lot of work in Jerusalem. And that just means that, we believe in Yeshua, and we believe in the words of the New Testament, and the spiel. Everybody knows the spiel. You guys have given the spiel. So he goes, no, what you're saying is ridiculous. Jesus, he was this Christian guy. He came and he's in his late 30s. He's a high school teacher. He's not an idiot. He goes, no, like, there's Judaism and then there's Christianity. He was literally doing this with his hand. And this Jesus guy and all of his followers, they were all Christians. And I said, I'd like to share with you something that's maybe a little bit different than what you've heard. And I told him, I said, listen, like, Yeshua was Jewish. And gave the rest of the spiel. And he said, you're making this really weird gray zone for me right now. This doesn't make any sense to me. I have this black and this white, and you're forming this gray zone, and I don't get it. I said, well, listen, like, if you want to check out, like, the Gospels, these writers are Jewish, and, you know, everything that you're going to read, you're going to understand. And he was like, wow, that's crazy. Can I ask more questions about this? And I said, of course. So we went on to a further discussion in Hebrew, of course, and it was just fascinating, and it really encouraged me, not just, you know, I don't know what this project will do or where it will go. God gave it to me, and I've been sprinting with this the last 2 months while I've been full-time working and doing things in Israel. But I looked at that, and I said, you know what? It's very obvious that the Lord teaches us a lot of really interesting basics about sharing the gospel or sharing the news of Yeshua with our people. And that's a lot of times there's the bread and the bread and the fish first, right? And it was kind of this, I wouldn't say revelation, because this is something that I grew up learning, but maybe an extra emphasis on serve people and they'll inquire. Like, your life is a testimony, and this is incredibly important. And you can bang somebody over the head with a Bible 1,000,000 times, and they'll never listen to a word you say. But you take time to serve them in ways that are extraordinary, and God gives you open doors. And especially with other Jews who I serve with, I really seek out his guidance on timing and on words. And it was just a really beautiful opportunity that came up just filming this video a couple of weeks ago. So I want to ask for your prayer. Take these magnets home. Pray for the IDF, not just in services. Every time you open your fridge door, pray for them. Pray for Gad and Netanel and Matan by name. On the website, there's more information about exactly where they're served, what exactly their units are, and you can kind of gather that. Gad serves in Gaza, Netanel serves in Judea and Samaria, otherwise known as the West Bank. And they're doing really serious work, and I'm grateful to them, which is why I'm doing this and spending my time here. But it's important for me that you guys pray for them, and now that you know, you have a duty. So I apologize, but I'm grateful. That's how I grew up. If you know that there's a problem and you can have a hand in it, then it's on you to have a hand in it. And for me, that's prayer. If the Lord puts on your heart to donate, that's amazing. I appreciate that. I would love it if you can't give even $1, I understand. I did not grow up in a wealthy home. I get it. I'm not looking for that. I would love for you guys to share this effort with some other people. After Shabbat, hop on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever people are on these days and send out the link and just say, hey, my friend Judy is working on this project. Check it out and donate if you can. $5 helps. $10 helps. Sometimes numbers can be a little bit exhausting. Each helmet is $300 and each vest with their plates are $950. So it's an expensive effort. But just seeking out people who are willing to partner and who are interested in kind of hearing what it is that we're up to over in Israel. All the civilians are still in this. So I just want to close with a verse that came to my mind as I started this project. I'll just read the short chapter of Psalm 28. To you, O Lord, I call, my rock, do not be deaf to me. For if you are silent to me, I will become like those who go down to the pit. Hear the voice of my supplications when I cry to you for help. When I lift up my hands toward your holy sanctuary, do not drag me away with the wicked and with those who work iniquity, who speak peace with their neighbors while evil is in their hearts. Requite them according to their work and according to the evil of their practices. Requite them according to the deeds of their hands. Repay them by the recompense. Because they do not regard the works of the Lord nor the deeds of his hands, he will tear them down and not build them up. Blessed be the Lord, because he has heard the voice of my supplication. The Lord is my strength and my shield. My heart trusts in him, and I am helped. Therefore my heart exults, and with my song I shall thank him. The Lord is their strength, and he is a saving defense to his anointed. Save your people and bless your inheritance. Be their shepherd also, and carry them forever. So this has been the chapter that has been on my mind since the war started. Also on the site I have like a PDF of some of the Psalms to pray for Israel. And this is just, we were talking about when all the nations will join themselves to Adonai, and that'll be a glorious day. I don't know if we'll be around to see it or not, but it'll be a glorious day. Until then, we're still kind of living in this psalm, where nations are against Israel or nations aren't in support. So we need to be. So anyways, thank you guys so much for your time. I really appreciate you taking a few minutes on your Shabbat to listen to kind of my experiences and to being open to this kind of initiative. So I pray for you guys, and I'll just kind of close here in prayer, and then whatever happens next will go on. Abba, thank you so much. I just praise you. I praise you for who you are, that you are a faithful God to your people, that you love your people, Israel. God, that you love those and bless those who support her in prayer. And I pray a blessing over this congregation. I pray that you would uplift this congregation, that you would bring new people, new Jewish people and Gentiles who are supporting Israel and want to be part of the Messianic faith here, and that they would be blessed by the services here and by the community here. Lord, we know that they will know us by our love between us. So I just emphasize that. I pray for love between us. I thank you for this congregation. I thank you for those who are serving right now in Israel. I thank you for the reservists who have put their lives on hold and who left their kids and their wives behind to spend time serving in the field. I pray protection over them. God, we pray that you would bless their families for their service. Bring comfort to those families of hostages that are still in Gaza and families of those who have passed. I just pray wisdom for our leaders in Israel, just divine wisdom to continue leading them and guiding them during this war. And we pray that all of this service would just be a blessing back to you. In Yeshua's name, amen. Thanks, guys.